to become more competitive and take informed risks. His modest rises were useful, where Lloyd's were catastrophic. But if we look at the women, there's no rise in testosterone levels at all. There's no doubt that women can be competitive, but they don't have the edge that testosterone can give men.
I am a very competitive person. I was trying to do my best. I think I just, you know, break. And then when I see somebody in front of me, instead of trying to swerve around them, I hesitate.
The men's rise in testosterone turbocharges their competitive instinct, though it can be a very mixed blessing.
I did. Cheers, big guys.
It's not by chance that women are less prone to road rage.
Just quite bitter, actually.
Testosterone is an incredibly powerful hormone. It affects us all, men and women. And it affects us well before we're even born. For the first few weeks of development, it's impossible to tell if the tiny embryo floating in its amniotic fluid is a boy or a girl. They all appear to be female. But in week 8, the males start to produce testosterone in huge quantities, and their bodies change. And it's recently been discovered that from the very start, they seem to behave differently as well. At just a few hours old, girls prefer to look at a human face, while boys will look at, well, anything really. Barely born, and yet girls like people, and boys like things. Professor Simon Baron-Cohen had a hunch that the differences in behavior were down to testosterone. He just needed proof.
I was very surprised to discover that hospitals routinely store the amniotic fluid after they carry out an amniocentesis. This was the opportunity that we were looking for. Here was the fluid that, if you like, allowed us to go back in time to make any link between the hormone levels in the womb and the child's current behaviour.
Well, finding the amniocentesis test was tremendously exciting because never before were you able to measure testosterone levels produced by the child and look at later behaviour in relation to that.
Oh, look at that there. Why do you think the big triangle is pushing the little one? You don't know? Well, all the cartoons are designed to make people think about the two triangles as people. And what we want to look at is whether there's any difference between the ones with high testosterone and low testosterone.
The kids with high testosterone are more likely to behave in a masculine way than the kids with low testosterone.
The mummy and the baby, and the mummy's pushing the baby out of the thumb so she could watch telly. The baby too noisy.
Yeah, that's great. If the big triangle was a person, what kind of person would it be?
A triangle person.
A triangle person? What about the little triangle? What kind of person would they be?
Yeah, but they're not, because they haven't got any legs.
And we've been able to show that the testosterone levels, week 16 of your life, are related to the eye contact you make, the social relationships you have, the interests you have, how fast you learn to talk. All these things that could be very, very important in the long term for who you are.
Most of us will never have the opportunity to have our amniotic fluid analysed. But there is a scientist whose controversial theory could mean that we can all tell how much testosterone we've been exposed to in the womb right now.
Our fingers have information about how much testosterone, how much estrogen we've been exposed to in the womb. So the longer one's ring finger relative to one's index finger, the more testosterone you've had. And that testosterone has an effect on the brain and on the body. If a boy has a large amount of testosterone before birth, he's likely to be born with a very efficient heart and vascular system. So the longer one's ring finger relative to one's index finger, the faster one can run.
These athletes are 5,000 metres specialists. Professor Manning has never met them or seen them race, but if his theory is correct, he'll be able to tell us all about them.
What I should be able to do is look at the differences between the ring finger and the index finger, and on that basis rank these runners first, second, third, fourth, and so on. In theory, that should work.
In practice, we're providing Professor Manning with photocopies of the athlete's hands, and in return, he's risking his reputation by providing us with the results of a race that has yet to be run.
I'm looking at a kind of living fossil in the fingers, something which tells us about an event a long time ago in the development of this particular individual. Each of these cards has got a number on. The number's obscured, so don't take the front off. And the number is my prediction as to where you're going to end up at the end of the race. On your marks. There are other variables that I just have no knowledge of whatsoever. How many times do these runners train, for example? Are they feeling okay today? Have they had a row with their girlfriend? You know, I don't know these men, and all I've seen are their hands. You know, I'm quite nervous about this. I hope I'm right, and I'm willing to give it a go.
In most people, the difference between ring and index fingers is small, but the ring finger of one of our runners is a whopping 6 millimeters longer than his index finger. And Professor Manning is certain that he's found his winner.
That was absolutely magnificent. What I'd like you to do is to line up in your finishing order, and we'll work down the line, and I'll rip your numbers off. Starting with Russell.
Oh my God, that is amazing. Quite like so far. No way!
Oh, controversy!
He was in front of him.
Five,
See where he comes.
6. We've got 4 out of 6 right, but the 2 that were wrong were kind of quite close.
Yeah, I thought the finger thing was bollocks because there's so many variables. I'm very impressed.
Professor Manning has agreed to do one further, more radical test. To see if finger length can be used to determine our volunteers' brain sex, how male or female their brains are.
If I arrange you along this line, in terms of the amount of testosterone you've had before birth, that has no implications for sexuality, but it has some implications about your very, very early brain organisation.
Our fingers may provide a record of testosterone in the womb, because the genes that trigger its production also determine finger growth. In general, the men and women perform to type. The men are at the male end, and the women are at the female end. Liz and Craig are at opposite ends. But there's one exception. Grace's fingers put her well into the male domain. In our survey of 500,000 people, the biggest difference between men and women was in visuospatial tasks. On average, men scored 40% higher than women. But some women did outstandingly well. And Professor Manning thinks that's partly down to testosterone. If Professor Manning is right, Grace should do rather well at our very own visuospatial task.
Hi everybody.
Hi.
My name's Tony.
Good morning.
I'm here today to teach you on the cat.
432 back over.